Welcome to another episode of the 6Ps podcast. Today we're going to be focusing on background information in relation to Oedipus the King, a play by Sophocles. So some basic information: this play was first performed in 429 BCE. Now, as a genre, it is a tragedy, and typically in these plays a protagonist experiences catastrophic events. Sophocles was a prominent playwright in ancient Greece, very similar to Euripides, who obviously we've studied before. Now, Sophocles uses the well-known story of Oedipus and presents it to a contemporary audience. Oedipus is one of 7 Sophocles plays which still exist today, and there are 2 others in the copy or the book that we've got. And while there have been many translations, we're looking at the Robert Fagles translation. So please note, if you are going to do some research on this outside of the text, just double check it's the right translation, because you don't want to get your quotes mixed up. So I just wanted to run through, I guess, a summary of this particular play. It's set in the city of Thebes, and they are in the depths of a plague and are in urgent need of help. Their king, Oedipus, who previously saved them from a sphinx, looks to the gods to assist him in protecting the citizens of Thebes. However, he becomes caught up in prophecies, and rather than focusing on the town and protecting them, he places all his energy into finding out the true identity of his mother and father. He becomes paranoid and lacks rationality, and Oedipus, who is overcome by fear as well, eventually finds out the horrible truth, that he killed his father and that he is married to his mother. He blinds himself as punishment, and Creon, his brother-in-law, becomes the king of Thebes. This text is set in the city of Thebes, as we've mentioned, so you can see that there on the map. But there are some other places as well we should look at. We've got Corinth, which we know from Medea. This is where Oedipus once lived, and he flees and ends up in Thebes. We've got Delphi, which is where the oracle lives, and that is in the region of Phocis, and this is where, or the region where Oedipus kills his father. You've also got Mount Cithaeron, and that is where Oedipus is abandoned. So let's look at some characters. We'll start with Oedipus. He is the king of Thebes after solving the riddle of the Sphinx, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. The prophecies that he hears and his desire to find his true identity is what drives him. He lacks rationality and coolness, though, during the crisis in Thebes, and that leads to his downfall. We've got Creon, who is a brother-in-law to Oedipus, the brother of his wife. Now, while Oedipus is quite amicable towards him, he grows to fear and resent him, and is worried that Creon wants to become king and that Creon is going to kill him. He demonstrates, unlike Oedipus, Creon demonstrates rationality, selflessness, and honour, and I guess he is depicted in the end as being the true hero. We've got Jocasta as well. This is Oedipus's wife and also mother, and she's Creon's sister as well. She is initially depicted as being quite calm and considered, especially when sort of, I guess, alongside Oedipus, who is a bit out of control. But that changes very quickly when she realizes the truth, which include her past, and her past indiscretions are revealed. And the last character we'll look at now is Tiresias. He is a blind seer, but he is not blind to the truth, unlike Oedipus, and he reveals Oedipus's future to him. Oedipus views him as being quite antagonistic and dismisses and underestimates him. Tiresias features heavily at the beginning of the play, and the words he says to Oedipus are, I guess, the catalyst to his downfall. I am missing one particular character, but I will get onto that a little bit later. That, of course, is the chorus. We'll just briefly run through some historical context here. This play, of course, would have been performed in Athens. It was a democracy at the time and was, I guess, very strong in upholding democratic values. They were in the midst of the Peloponnesian Wars, and Athens was in the grip of this war at the time, fighting against, I should say, Sparta, not alongside, against Sparta. And the time period is classical Greece. So science, literature, the arts and philosophy were booming in Athens during this time. These pursuits were, I guess, very well respected. Speaking of the time, in ancient Greece, there was a belief that the gods controlled their fate, and as a result, they would pray to the gods for protection and also guidance. If the gods were unhappy with someone's actions, they would punish them. And citizens would consult oracles, prophets, priests, priestesses, and seers who were able to communicate with the gods and foretell the future before making decisions. Something to note in the plays we've looked at by Euripides, the gods are characters and they speak. In this text, though, they don't. So the prominent figures that you should know are, I should say, Apollo, who's the god of sun and light. We've got Zeus, who's the god of gods. Athena and Artemis are mentioned. They're the goddesses of wisdom and wilderness, respectively. You've got Cadmus, who is mentioned. He's the founder of Thebes, who brought writing and the alphabet to the Greeks. And the Oracle of Delphi is mentioned as well. This is who the characters go and seek out in terms of finding out their futures. Now, I did want to focus on Apollo because he is the voice of destiny in the play. And it's through the prophecies that are told by the oracles, prophets, and seers and priests that reveal the following. And I should say that unlike in some of the plays we've looked at, like Medea, the gods don't actually speak in Oedipus. Now, Laius, Oedipus's father, is told that he would be killed by his own son. This leads to him abandoning Oedipus. Oedipus is told that he would kill his father and marry his mother. This leads to him fleeing Corinth. So you can see how these prophecies dictate the way the characters act. Now, Creon is told that the city of Thebes will be saved from the plague once they punish and exile their former king's killer, which of course turns out to be Oedipus. So it is important to note that the audience watching this play in 429 BCE would have already been really familiar with the story of Oedipus. So rather than the focus being on the plot development and the rising tension, Sophocles more so would have been focusing on getting the audience to reflect on the characters' motivations, values, and actions, and getting them to consider those in their current time. So they would have already known that when Oedipus is born, that Laius sees an oracle who tells him that his son will kill him. He tells his wife to kill Oedipus after binding his legs, but Jocasta is unable to go through with it, and Oedipus is taken by a servant to the mountain and eventually is adopted by the king of Corinth. They would have known Oedipus's prophecy, that after hearing that he might not be related to his parents, the king and queen of Corinth, he goes to the oracle of Delphi, who tells him, rather than who his parents are, she actually tells him that he will kill his own father and marry his mother. And as a result of that, he flees Corinth. And they would already have known about Oedipus's heroics and solving the riddle of the Sphinx. So the Sphinx was, I guess, tormenting the city of Thebes and anyone visiting Thebes. She was punishing them, and she had a riddle which Oedipus was able to correctly solve. And as a result, I think she threw herself off a cliff, I believe. And that leads to him becoming king of Thebes. The riddle revolves around something like what starts with 4 legs, then has 2, and then only has 1. And the answer is a human, because when humans are first born, they crawl on their 4 arms and legs, then they walk on 2 legs, and then eventually when they can become older and frail, they're down to 1 leg. So Oedipus answers that, and that leads to him becoming the king of Thebes. And just a bit of a visual here about what a theatre would have looked like in ancient Greece or classical Greece here. You can see it pretty minimalistic, you'll probably notice as well. So it's less so, I guess, on what the visual part of it, and more so on, I guess, the words and getting the audience to reflect on what's happening in front of them. So the theatre was really important for a number of reasons. One is, I guess, religious reasons, and plays were performed at festivals that paid respects to the gods. It was important as well because it provided citizens with the opportunity to purge their emotions and, I guess, a sense of catharsis. It also served as a means in educating citizens about the moral and ethical dilemmas, as well as educating them too, I guess. Now, we've obviously read The Women of Troy, so we know how important plays were in terms of being able to criticise political thinking and social norms of the time. Obviously, Women of Troy was quite allegorical. And less important for Oedipus, but something to note, I guess, is that theatre was a male-dominated sphere. Actors and audience, they were all men. Now, a character that I didn't mention was the chorus, and we've obviously seen the chorus in the plays that we've done by Euripides before. But the role of the chorus is to connect the audience to the characters as they watch the action taking place in front of them. They will comment on the action appearing on the stage and look to sympathise or chastise the character's actions and motivations. And often it's their words and questions that will prompt the audience to reflect on their own values. And depending on their words, that will dictate who the audience should sympathise with. Now, in Oedipus the King, the chorus is made up of Theban men. They are experiencing the plague in Thebes firsthand and pray to Apollo in the first Stasiemon. Something a little bit different, I guess, about this play is there is a leader of the chorus, and they actually interact with Oedipus and the other characters in the play, which is very different, obviously, to what we've seen in Medea, where they're a little bit more separate in terms of speaking to actual characters. In terms of key themes, there are a lot that you could look at, but I guess the main one is definitely fate and destiny. That's something which I guess there's questions about fate that come up throughout the whole play. Other aspects to look at or ideas to look at would involve the gods, identity, pride, power, family, belonging, respect, morality, violence, ambition, and truth and ignorance. So these are some ideas which I would probably be focusing on once I've read the text a couple of times and looking at the ways that all these themes and ideas interconnect to each other as well. So I wanted to look at some next level analysis just briefly, because what's really important to know is that while you should be analysing the plot of this particular text, you also want to focus on the way it's constructed. So being able to use context information, linguistic, stylistic and structural features, symbols, motifs and authorial intent is really important when it comes to analysing the text, to show the examiners and your markers that you're not looking at not just what happens in the text, but how it is told in the text. So a couple of literary features you should look out for when you're reading the text. Obviously, stage directions are really important because they are what makes this text type unique. We don't have stage directions in other texts. So really important that you look at these. They provide us with key information regarding a character's physical reactions and also sometimes their appearance as well. You know, Creon walks in with a wreath, for example. So there's lots of little bits and pieces you can pick up on. On line 1144, Jocasta turns sharply. It's that idea of, you know, showing, not telling. She turns sharply when she works out, she has that light bulb moment where she realizes that her husband is in fact her son. So look out for stage directions that you can analyze. Dramatic irony is really prominent in this text. It's when an audience knows something the characters do not. And we already know that the audience knew the story of Oedipus going into watching this play. So the text is littered with irony and dramatic irony because the audience already knows Oedipus's fate. So when he sort of has a go at Tiresias saying, you don't know what you're talking about, Tiresias actually does. We've got imagery as well. There's graphic imagery to depict violence. This appears off stage as it normally did, but you've got animalistic and nautical imagery as well, and we'll probably touch on that a little bit in a later episode, but we've sort of looked at that already in Medea last year. We've got plenty of symbols and motifs. You know, there's light and dark, birds, wreaths, you know, blindness, Oedipus's band ankles and swollen feet, the crossroads, where Oedipus kills his father. The truth's a bit of a motif that runs throughout as well. Again, we'll touch on these a little bit later. Some are really obvious, but there might be some symbols that you might pick up on that haven't been picked up on as much, and I think it's important to look at those too. And there's obviously foreshadowing as well, hints at what is to come. So we've looked at most of these features before in the past, and it's just a matter of picking out little bits and pieces and moments and quotations that you can use that will provide you with, I guess, a unique perspective on the text. So just wanted to run through, I guess, the typical structure of a Greek tragedy, and obviously some of these words will be very familiar because we've looked at them in the past. Now the prologue is the introduction which sets the scene. I should have put examples here, sorry. These are the first couple of pages of the text. Now we've got episode, an episode which is dialogue between characters, and after each episode is a stasimon, which is where the chorus come in and comment on what they've witnessed. So again, the typical structure will be episode stasimon, episode stasimon, episode stasimon. Some more meta language. The peripateia, this is a sudden reversal or change. We've got the anagnorisis, which is a realization when a character fully understands their circumstances, the light bulb moment where everything clicks for them. So when Oedipus obviously finally realizes that he's killed his father and then he's married to his mother. We've got catharsis, which we've touched on already, which is the emotional release at the end of the play. The exodus is the closing scene. The komos is sort of towards the end of the play, the lament between the chorus and the characters after Oedipus has blinded himself. And the hamartia, which is a protagonist's fatal flaw, which I guess in this case is the fact that Oedipus is unaware that he's killed his own father. In terms of authorial intent, there's many reasons why Sophocles wrote this play. There are so many ideas, values, and opinions. One of them, I've sort of touched on a couple here. One is the importance of respecting the gods and the prophecies. So through Oedipus and his hubris, Sophocles is warning the audience about opposing the gods and or believing you are above them. Oedipus definitely underestimates the power of the gods and overestimates himself. In terms of fate, Sophocles argues that humans do not have the power to dictate or change their own destinies. And you can look at the irony here and the way that Oedipus flees Corinth in order to defy his fate, but ends up living it out. We've got ideas around morality, and Sophocles definitely champions individuals who maintain their morality in the face of greed and power. And look at the characterization of Creon compared to Oedipus. Again, we'll look at this in a later episode, but Creon is definitely shown to be someone who's quite heroic because of the way he acts with rationality as opposed to Oedipus. There are a lot of other values and ideas around the truth and punishment and ignorance and having, good quality characteristics and traits. Again, we'll probably look at these in a later episode as well, but really start thinking about the reasons why Sophocles wrote this text and think about those authorial intent verbs. So what does he celebrate and champion, and what does he denounce and condemn through this play? The last thing I wanted to touch upon is the introduction to the text. So it's about 20 pages long and it's really lengthy. It discusses the historical context as well as links to, more modern literature, psychology and philosophy. It does provide some interpretation on the key themes and ideas, particularly for a contemporary audience, so for the modern day, but it is quite dense, and my recommendation would be to read it after you've read the play once, because it might be a little bit overwhelming if you read it the first time, not knowing the play, in a little bit more detail. So please do read it though, definitely read it at least once after you've read the play. Just in closing, some feedback would be to definitely conduct further background research on the social, cultural and historical context of the novel. Now, this is really important. This play has been studied for a really, really long time, so you can look widely. There is so much information out there in books, internet essays, there's a lot out there. Have a read through it, collate information, read the play as many times as you can as well. So I often read it once for understanding and a second, third and fourth time to highlight the key moments and analyze themes and construction. If you're someone that likes to use highlighters and different colors for different aspects, please by all means do that as well. And start building a quotation bank as soon as possible. So a way to do this would be just simply to, start by jotting down all the important quotes you think are there, then potentially breaking them up. Looking at breaking them up into characters, into themes, into text features, any way that you possibly can. And once you start building a couple of quote banks, what you'll find is some of them become quite prominent and appear a lot. So those are the quotes that I always think are worth memorizing because they're quite adaptable. But please, as I said, read the text a couple of times, build up your knowledge, and once you've done that, you'll be able to start looking at essay writing. But thanks for joining me today, looking at a brief run through of some background information, and I look forward to many more videos throughout the year.